It was my first time staying overnight at my boyfriend's place. In the dead of night, his ex-girlfriend suddenly opened the door and burst into the bedroom. I could feel his body instantly stiffen beside me. The room plunged into an unnerving silence. "Ethan," she choked out, her voice hoarse and raw with tears, almost unrecognizable. Yet, as if nothing had happened, he tightened his grip on my wrist and with an almost deliberate nonchalance, continued to kiss me. Bang! The door slammed shut with a force that seemed tragically inevitable, the sound echoing and lingering in the heavy silence of the night. I heard my own voice, strained and difficult, ask, How did she still have the code to your door lock?" Ethan paused, his lips still brushing mine, then murmured, his voice so low it was barely a whisper. "After we broke up, I just forgot to change it." "Right." I instinctively turned my head away, pulling back from his touch. He froze for a second, then gently cupped my face, his thumb brushing against my skin. He promised, his voice soft and almost dismissive, "Really? It's true." Meeting his dark eyes, which were devoid of any trace of lingering desire for me, I found myself unable to speak. In a blur I thought of Zara, his ex-girlfriend who had just left. Earlier that afternoon, she had sent me a taunting message. "He's just something I didn't want anymore. Believe me, I just have to lift a finger and he'll come crawling back." Ethan had been sitting right beside me when I read it. He'd seen the message, but his expression hadn't changed, as if the words had nothing to do with him. I was the only one stewing in silent anger. It wasn't that I feared Zara could actually steal him away. I wasn't the type to get into a jealous spat over a baseless provocation from an ex, or to doubt my relationship with Ethan based on something so petty. I just felt indignant on his behalf, and hurt. I had wanted to say more then, but Ethan suddenly leaned in, claiming my lips without a word. His voice was hoarse, laced with a strange, alluring coaxing. "Aurora, stay tonight. Don't go home." Ethan was usually quite reserved, and moments of intimacy, even just kissing, were infrequent between us. This was the first time he had used such a tender endearment as wife. Though it wasn't a literal translation, it carried that weight of intimacy. The first time he had initiated staying over. I hadn't refused. I never imagined that this night, our first time truly being together in his space, would be interrupted by Zara. In that moment by the door, her face had been deathly pale, her eyes wide with shock and pain. She had looked almost pitiful. Yet Ethan hadn't spared her a single glance throughout the entire encounter. Was it because he dared not look? Or because he couldn't bear to look away? A sudden crack of thunder directly overhead jolted me back to the present. A blinding flash of lightning illuminated the window, casting an eerie, cold glow across Ethan's pale face. "It's raining," I stated, the observation strangely detached. Ethan froze. His eyes darted towards the window, a sudden flicker of something, worry, regret, clouding his usually placid gaze. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. I just stared at him, frozen. We'd been together for so long. Even when he tried to hide it, I could easily see the truth in his eyes. He was worried about Zara, potentially out there alone in the rain. And he regretted it. Regretted being here with me tonight. A wave of icy coldness spread from my chest, instantly chilling me to the core. My fingers trembled as I violently pushed him away. Reflected in his pupils, I saw my own distraught face. I lowered my gaze. Could you leave for a moment? I need to change." A complex expression flickered across his face. Something like confusion mixed with resignation, but he said nothing. He simply turned and left the room in silence. When I finally finished changing and walked out of the bedroom, I saw Ethan standing by the front door. He held an umbrella in one hand, while the other was glued to his phone, repeatedly dialing a number. With each repeated phone is off message from the other end, the anxiety and impatience on his face became starkly obvious. I watched him frozen in place. Without thinking, I stumbled over something, my knee slamming hard into the edge of a nearby table. The impact sent a searing pain through the bone. Not wanting him to notice, I gritted my teeth against the pain and quickly sank onto the nearby sofa. He heard my movement and turned back, a flicker of hesitation in his expression. Seeing me, his lips pressed into a thin, tight line. Took him a moment to speak. "The rain is too heavy," he finally said, his voice low. "She wasn't in a good state when she left. I can't let anything happen to her." Excruciating pain shot up from my knee. I bit my lip, the unspoken plea almost escaping my lips. Don't go. Please. I'm sorry, Aurora, he said, his response immediate, without a hint of hesitation. Something inside me snapped. The last vestiges of my pride shattered. I struggled to stand, limping awkwardly towards him, tears instantly blurring my vision. Ethan, I choked out, you're right. You do owe me an apology. I took a shaky breath, roughly wiping away the tears with the back of my hand. If you never moved on from her, I said, my voice trembling. Why were you with me? Was I just a placeholder? Something to pass the time while you waited? My voice cracked on the word placeholder. But I still lifted my head, staring up at him, stubbornly wanting an answer I already knew. My injured leg gave way and I stumbled. Ethan reached out instantly, his hand firm on my waist, steadying me. What happened to your leg? He asked, his voice sharp with concern. I just looked at him, unable to form words. Ethan's eyes darkened slightly. Without a word, he gently scooped me up into his arms and carried me back to the sofa. He returned with a first aid kit and carefully rolled up my pant leg, his touch surprisingly gentle, which momentarily caught me off guard. My right knee was already visibly swollen, with a large patch of scraped skin bleeding profusely, the crimson streaks winding down my calf. It was more severe than I'd thought. Ethan's frown deepened. He took out antiseptic, his voice hoarse. Bear with it, he murmured. The next second, a cool stinging liquid hit my knee. The pain was so sharp, I instantly gripped his arm, my fingernails digging into his skin. Ethan endured it without a sound. After disinfecting it, he pulled out a tube of ointment, but it was nearly empty. I'll go buy some more, he said, standing up. I grabbed his arm, my eyes welling up again. He paused, his long lashes lowering, his expression softening slightly. The pharmacy is just downstairs, he said gently. 10 minutes tops. I'll be right back. 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. When I checked my phone again, I realized nearly 3 hours had passed. My knee had long since gone numb from the throbbing pain. My throat felt terribly dry, and a glass of water was within reach. I lifted my injured leg, moving stiffly, and slowly, a seemingly simple action that took almost 3 minutes. Finally, I managed to pick up the glass and gulp down the water, only to realize the boiled water Ethan had poured for me before leaving had gone completely cold. Just wait a little longer. Just wait a little longer. After another hour, I started calling him repeatedly, sending message after message. He didn't answer a single call. He didn't reply to a single text. A chilling ashen calm settled over my eyes. I don't know how much longer I waited. Then a message arrived. It was from Zara. 2 blocks of text and a photo. The photo showed Ethan standing in a hotel kitchen, stirring a pot, making ginger tea. In the picture, Ethan was soaked through his hair, his clothes, everything clung to him, dripping. He'd taken an umbrella, hadn't he? Yet he was completely drenched. He looked utterly disheveled, almost miserable. But the expression in his eyes, the curve of his lips was calm, peaceful. Content even. He said he'd never touched you before, the first message read. That tonight was your first time. Huh, the second sneered. When we first got together. It was past 3 in the morning when Ethan finally returned. Snap. The small wall lamp by the entrance clicked on, casting a weak, yellowish light that fell across his face, making it look even paler, more washed out. Why aren't you asleep? He seemed surprised to see me sitting motionless on the sofa. My hand gripping my phone stilled. I just stared at him in silence. I went to queue for the cheesecake, he said, lifting the box he carried. Our breakfast tomorrow. You know that place only opens late at night. The line was pretty long. He spoke with his usual detached tone, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Seeing my silence, Ethan's brow furrowed slightly. He slowly walked towards the sofa. What's wrong? He looked at me for a long moment, then carefully lifted my injured leg onto his lap. He bent his head, examining it closely. Does your knee still hurt? From this angle, I could see the tips of his dark hair brush against the back of his neck. It looked soft and smooth, as if it had just been washed and dried. Zara's words from earlier flooded back into my ears, sharp and taunting, as if they were being screamed right beside me. Humiliation, indignity, rage, they shattered every last bit of my composure. I trembled uncontrollably, pulling my leg away from his touch, deliberately distancing myself. Ethan froze for a moment, his expression bewildered. It's too late, I said, my voice deliberately flat. My knee is injured. I'll just stay on your sofa tonight. I'll transfer you the money for the lodging tomorrow. Ethan's eyes finally darkened, his face becoming frigid as he stared at me. Aurora, what on earth are you doing? What is this? This performance? A performance? I repeated, meeting his gaze. Ethan, where exactly were you tonight? Ethan's lashes fluttered, but his gaze carefully avoided mine. I went to get your medicine, he said. And then I went to wait in line for the cake. So where is the medicine? Ethan didn't answer. Tonight I called you 58 times. I sent you 105 messages. My voice was steady, emotionless. Before you left, you poured me a glass of water. You said it would take 10 minutes, tops, and the water would be cool enough to drink by the time you got back. I don't know if she was okay or not, but my leg hurts. The room was dimly lit, leaving Ethan's face mostly in shadow, his expression unreadable. I could only see his fingers curling slightly, rubbing back and forth over the seam of his trousers, a nervous habit indicating he was agitated, wanting a cigarette. I blinked, trying to force back the sting of tears in my eyes. I stared at his indifferent face, bit my lip until I tasted blood, and then with immense effort I spoke. Ethan, let's break up. Almost instantly, Ethan grabbed my hand, his voice low and firm. I don't agree. I can explain, he said. The medicine fell into a gutter on the way to the cake shop. My phone fell and broke too, so I didn't get your messages. Silence hung heavy in the air. I stared at him, unblinking. Ethan's brow was tightly furrowed. He raised a hand and roughly unbuttoned the top button of his shirt, pulling out a cigarette and lighting it. I had asked him to quit countless times, but he had never listened. Of course. Why would he care about what I said? Only after the scent of mint smoke dissipated did I hear Ethan's voice, raw with hoarseness. I'm sorry. If you're apologizing for leaving me to go to her, I don't accept it, I said softly. Ethan looked momentarily stunned, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of defeat in his eyes. She's my university classmate after all. Just a university classmate? I tried to keep my voice level, pushing down the surge of pain. Ethan was silent for a long time before finally speaking. Her parents called me a few days ago. They said she'd flown here on her own, and they were worried about her. Something happened. I didn't know how I'd explain it to her family. He looked at me, his gaze pleading. Aurora, I never intended to get back together with her, you. Before he could finish, I held up my phone, showing him Zara's taunting messages and the photo. He froze. You went to find her, I said, my voice shaking now. And your clothes and hair were soaked. What exactly happened between you? I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat. And if you never planned to get back together, why would you tell her you hadn't touched me, like you were trying to reassure her? My voice was thick with tears I was desperate to hold back. Ethan, what did you ever see me as? Looking at his pale, silent face, seemingly unable to refute me, I felt a strange urge to laugh. In an instant, so many small details I had deliberately ignored before became painfully clear. He had been the one to pursue me initially. He transferred to the headquarters 2 years ago, and we'd worked on several projects together. We were unexpectedly compatible. Professionally, we'd often stayed up late, working side by side, and the dynamic between us had subtly shifted. So when he'd finally asked me out, I hadn't thought long before agreeing. For the year we'd been together, aside from his sometimes distant nature, Ethan had treated me well. He hadn't deliberately hidden his past. I knew he'd had a 5-year relationship with his first love, his university sweetheart. They broke up a year after graduation. It was impossible not to care about that history, but dwelling on it felt like torturing myself unnecessarily. I'd asked him why they broke up. His reason was simple, stated with unsettling calmness. We weren't suitable. And then he had looked at me, his expression incredibly serious, and said, Aurora, I think we're quite suitable. To be fair, he had sounded utterly sincere. But my heart had sunk in that instant. Suitable. For a couple in love, that should have been a positive word, a foundation. But hearing him say it, a strange, unsettling feeling had bubbled up inside me. Had he pursued me because he liked me, or just because he found me suitable? Perhaps sensing my shift in mood, Ethan hadn't said much more at the time. He just sighed softly, leaned in and kissed me, murmuring with a hint of helplessness, "Aurora, don't overthink things. We have a long time ahead of us." Our breathing had deepened, and I'd instinctively wrapped my arms around his neck. But then he had abruptly pulled away, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond me, lost in thought. After a long silence he had reached out, his hand slightly stiff, and gently ruffled my hair. "Aurora," he said quietly, "we have a lot of time." I hadn't thought much of it then. I believed he was being respectful, wanting to save our deepest intimacy for after we were engaged. Until Zara showed up. The signs had been there all along, I just hadn't wanted to see them. I loved him too much and love had blinded me, filtered out the inconsistencies, letting me believe he felt the same. Or maybe it wasn't even liking for him, just suitability. In the clear light of this realization, I felt utterly exposed, stripped bare and humiliated. This shame wasn't just from Zara's words. It was delivered with the knife that Ethan himself had handed her, in his eagerness to placate her. I couldn't even imagine the Ethan who was with Zara. Was he as distant, as reserved? Surely not. Surely he was different with her. I calmly sent a message to my best friend Jessica, telling her Ethan and I had broken up and asking if she could pick me up tomorrow. I could tell she was surprised, but she didn't ask for details. She just sent a hug emoji and replied, "I'll be there." Just as I put down my phone, I felt my body lift. Ethan had scooped me up in his arms. I froze for a few seconds, my face hardening instantly. "What are you?" I began, but he cut me off, his voice firm and leaving no room for argument. "Your knee is injured. The sofa is too small. You should sleep in the bedroom." My lips pressed together in a tight line. I watched him with guarded, wary eyes. Ethan's expression changed slightly, but he quickly masked it. "I'll sleep on the sofa tonight," he said, his voice carefully neutral. I won't touch you." I paused, a sudden painful realization hitting me. My earlier reaction felt absurd, pathetic. Ethan never truly liked me. His attempt at intimacy tonight had only been a desperate, perhaps even spiteful reaction to Zara's taunting message. My defensiveness was meaningless. "Put me down," I said, looking him directly in the eye, my voice strangely calm. "I can walk myself. Thank you." As our gazes met, I thought I saw a flicker of hurt in his eyes. I must have been mistaken. Ethan didn't say anything else. He silently lowered me to the ground. I didn't look at him again, just turned and limped towards the bedroom. Just as I closed the door, I heard Ethan's voice, slightly hoarse, call out, "Aurora." I paused. Ethan was silent for a moment longer. Then from his pocket he pulled out a small box and opened it. Inside lay a small, delicate women's ring. "Zara. She threw it into the gutter," he said, his voice low. It was raining heavily, there were no streetlights, and my phone broke when I dropped it looking for it. I searched for a long time and I got completely soaked. I went to the hotel afterward to dry my clothes. "I was afraid you'd misunderstand." Ethan paused, his breathing seeming to quicken slightly. She was demanding to know if I was going to propose to you, asking why I had touched you. Everything was so chaotic then. I don't even know what I said in response. His lips were pressed together, his voice slightly hoarse, but I clearly heard a faint note of regret. "Zara's personality. She's completely different from you. Even back in university, she was willful and dramatic. She wouldn't stop until she'd turned someone's world upside down." Back in university. The phrase made my heart clench slightly. That was a time I could never reach, a space that belonged only to them, to their past. "I deleted her WeChat just now," he continued, his voice firmer, "and blocked her number. Tomorrow, I'll explain the situation to her parents and make sure she understands she shouldn't contact me about anything anymore." He looked up at me, his gaze steady now, promising each word. "Aurora, she and I, that's over." Perhaps sensing my prolonged silence, Ethan's lashes trembled slightly, and his lips paled a little. After a long moment he spoke softly. "Get some rest." I didn't speak. I just watched him quietly as he closed the door. Lying in bed, my eyes closed, I couldn't fall asleep. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion. After hearing his explanation, after seeing that ring, it was impossible not to feel something. But my mind kept replaying two images, alternating, overlapping. One was the moment Ethan had first held my hand in the car as he drove me home. his usually distant eyes softening, asking me very seriously if I wanted to start a relationship with him. The other was the image of him leaving me without hesitation, rushing out to find Zara. Could it truly be over between them? Even if their past was over, could my heart truly move past this? I woke up the next morning and walked out of the bedroom. The first thing I saw was a tube of ointment lying on the table. The late arrival of the medicine. I lowered my eyes, ignoring Ethan's slightly complex gaze, and walked directly towards the door. Just as my hand touched the doorknob, the door suddenly opened. Zara's bright, striking face burst into my view. Zara wasn't alone. She had brought a man with her. She was holding his arm, looking Jalmay and gentle with a radiant smile. They seemed utterly at ease and intimate. Together, the man's eyes swept over Ethan and me, and a slow smile spread across his lips. "Hello," he said smoothly. "I'm Asher, Zara's new boyfriend." Zara confidently took his hand, their fingers lacing together. I instinctively glanced at Ethan. He watched them calmly, his expression betraying no emotion, no hint of displeasure. "What are you doing here?" he asked Zara. Zara's face held an expression of innocent charm. "Last night you messaged me telling me not to bother you anymore," she said sweetly. "And I always do what you say, Ethan. So I brought my new boyfriend to say goodbye to you in person." Seeing Ethan's silence, Zara's smile widened. She pulled Asher confidently into the apartment, and they both sat down on the sofa, making themselves at home. "Aren't you two going to sit?" she asked, glancing pointedly at the unopened tube of ointment on the table. She winked at me. "Your leg is injured, isn't it? You haven't put any medicine on it since last night. TSK, how miserable. Standing like that isn't good for healing." My eyes narrowed and I turned to leave, but she called out, "Leaving already? Just because I showed up? Can't handle the competition, can you?" The last few words were spoken slowly, laced with a cold, mocking playfulness. My steps faltered. I clenched my fists, the surge of revulsion and anger threatening to overwhelm my reason. I was about to speak when an arm wrapped around my waist. Ethan stared directly at Zara, his voice low and steady. "Compared to you," he said slowly, "she is always the winner." Zara's face paled slightly, but she stared back at him defiantly. Watching them locked in their private confrontation, oblivious to my presence, I calmly shrugged off the arm around my waist. Ethan looked surprised. There were some freshly cut oranges on the table. Zara, avoiding Ethan's gaze, lowered her head, picked up a segment and took a small bite. When she looked up again, her face had regained its usual vibrant, sunny expression. "Actually, I don't like oranges," she said, her eyes fixed on Ethan, a suggestive smile playing on her lips. "I like grapes. But the grapes aren't here, so what can I do? I just have to settle, right, Ethan?" Her tone was innocent, yet loaded with hidden meaning. "People's tastes change," Ethan said, his voice calm. "She was never a compromise." He slowly took my hand, his tone light, yet unexpectedly serious. Hearing this, I felt a flicker of surprise and didn't pull away. Zara seemed to lose control of her composure. She was never good at hiding her emotions, and now her face was the picture of fury. "Ethan," she demanded, her voice sharp, "I'm asking you one last time. Her or me? Who do you choose?" Ethan paused, then lowered his eyes slightly, looking at me with an expression that was almost tender. The answer was unspoken but clear. My heart stirred faintly. Zara's eyes seemed to blaze with anger and obsession. She fiercely wiped away her tears with the back of her hand, speaking to Ethan in a voice that was almost desperate, each word biting. "Ethan, remember this. You're not the only man I can love." With that, under our watchful eyes, she turned her head and kissed Asher. It was a brief touch of lips, quickly broken. Seeing Ethan's expression remain unchanged, cold and indifferent, Zara's tears fell in heavy drops. Biting her lip, she turned and ran out of the apartment. I stood there, frozen, staring. At that moment, my fingertips, still held in Ethan's hand, felt a sudden sharp sting. It was as if his grip had tightened violently, perhaps a loss of control he didn't even realize. When I came back to myself, Ethan was no longer beside me. A chill seeped inch by inch into my chest. I don't know how I managed to walk out, or how I got to the stairwell landing. And then I saw it. Ethan had Zara pressed against the wall, one hand gripping the back of her head, kissing her fiercely, almost brutally. I had never seen him look like that before. He seemed desperate, afraid she would escape, his legs clamped tightly around hers. All his usual detachment and restraint had vanished. Perhaps sensing something, Zara, who had had her eyes closed, suddenly opened them as Ethan's kiss moved lower. She looked directly at me, and then she smiled, a triumphant, challenging smile. I stared at the scene, my throat constricting. The rushing wind in my ears seemed to fade. Everything went quiet. She had won. Or perhaps she had never lost at all. It had been like this from the first day Zara appeared at our office entrance, stopping Ethan. At the time, I had mistaken her for just another girl trying to hit on him. I had confidently linked my arm through Ethan's, marking my territory. "Sorry," I'd said to her. "He has a girlfriend." Zara had looked at me strangely then, just like she did now. Arrogant, challenging, full of disdain. That day, Ethan had ignored her pleas, put his arm around me, and walked me out of the office. He drove me home and even discussed the next day's meeting with me on the way. He was calm, as if Zara's appearance hadn't affected him at all, but he seemed to have forgotten something crucial. We were supposed to go to the movies that night. We had even planned to meet my parents after the movie. Perhaps from the very beginning this ending had been inevitable. A faint sound of footsteps followed by a playful tisk pulled me out of my memory. I didn't turn around, but I knew it was Asher, Zara's so-called new boyfriend. "Not much fun watching this by yourself," he said, his tone casual, tinged with gentle mockery. In my peripheral vision, Ethan's back instantly tensed. He released Zara almost violently, standing frozen in place. It took him a long moment, his fingers trembling slightly, before he slowly, stiffly, turned his head towards me. Our eyes met. I watched his face, which was slowly draining of color, watched the panic and helplessness bloom in his eyes. My own face felt calm, devoid of emotion. My heart was a strange thing. Just before I had loved him so deeply. But now, looking at him, I didn't even want to remember those moments. Even the feelings I had poured into the relationship now felt sickening. Ethan seemed to snap back to reality. He took a few steps towards me, as if reaching out to touch my hand. "Maybe wipe the lipstick off your mouth first," I said coldly, stepping back to avoid him. Ethan froze where he stood. His face grew paler and paler, his lips trembling. Suddenly, a long, slender hand reached out to him, holding a crumpled tissue stained with red. "If you don't mind that I just used it," Asher said, offering it. I looked up. It was Asher. Ethan naturally didn't take it. Asher raised an eyebrow, then chuckled carelessly. "Some people are just dramatic. You didn't mind kissing the woman I just kissed, but you mind a used tissue." Ethan's and Zara's faces both changed color. I could hear a faint, almost imperceptible note of irritation in Asher's voice. It was probably because of Zara. After all, we were both victims of sorts. Except Ethan and I had already broken up, while he had just witnessed his girlfriend kissing someone else. I looked at him with a touch of sympathy. He seemed to notice my gaze and paused briefly. Jessica's message arrived just then, saying she'd be there in about 10 minutes. I replied, "Waiting downstairs." Just as I was about to turn, I heard Ethan's hoarse voice. "Aurora." It was soft, a tone laced with a desperate, almost pleading undertone. But what could he possibly plead for now? "Ethan." Zara placed her hand on his shoulder, her face a mask of annoyance. "Why are you talking to her in that?" Ethan almost reflexively shrugged off her hand, instinctively and cautiously glancing at me. Zara froze. When she realized what had happened, her eyes turned red, and her voice became sharp. "Ethan, you followed me out here. You were the one who kissed me. Who are you putting on this act for now?" Ethan's face was deathly pale. He just stared at me, frozen. I didn't look at him again. I turned and walked towards the elevator without hesitation. As the elevator door began to close, I caught a glimpse of Asher through the gap. He mouthed the words, "Wait up." After a moment's thought, I pressed the open button. Asher stepped inside, and the atmosphere grew silent. In the reflection of the elevator wall, I saw him frowning, as if trying to figure out what to say. "Do you need something?" I asked. After a while, Asher finally spoke. "Nothing much, really. Just wanted to say sorry." "Sorry?" "A buddy asked for a favor. Said a friend of his was being harassed by her ex and threatened by his current girlfriend. He wanted me to pretend to be her boyfriend for a day." I understood. That friend was Zara. I wanted to refuse at first, but then he told me how handsome I was. I stared at him, a little stunned. From my perspective, Asher's lashes were lowered, his lips, which were naturally redder than most men's, were pressed together, and the bones on his face were sharp and defined. He was undeniably good-looking. But clearly Zara was the one harassing you guys. He shrugged slightly. My apologies. If it wasn't for me, your boyfriend. I interrupted him. Even without you, he and I would have broken up. He seemed surprised, looking at me for a moment before a faint smile touched his lips, his tone languid. Didn't expect helping out would cost me my innocence like this. How unlucky. When we got out of the elevator, we walked to the apartment building entrance. Jessica's car hadn't arrived yet, so I found a long bench and sat down, carefully stretching out my injured leg. You're quite interesting, Asher commented, sitting down a short distance away. Your knee is swollen like that, but you walked all the way here without making a sound. I paused, looking down the street to see if Jessica's car was coming. As I turned my head, the bright light made me squint, and I rubbed my eyes. Suddenly, a shadow fell over me, and Asher was sitting next to me. He kept a comfortable distance. Don't be too sad, he said, clearing his throat. I actually think your ex-boyfriend cares more about you than it seemed. The way he looked just now, he almost looked like he was about to get on his knees for you. I froze, realizing he'd misinterpreted my rubbing my eyes. I didn't explain. My voice was calm. He doesn't love me. We were together because he thought I was suitable. Suitable? Asher's expression showed he clearly didn't understand. I didn't want to elaborate. I just nodded dismissively and looked down at my phone, trying to end the conversation. Remembering he was just trying to be kind, I looked up and offered a brief explanation. It means he wanted to date Zara and marry me. Asher's eyes widened slightly, and he let out a low exclamation. Damn! His reaction surprised me. He lowered his head, seeming lost in thought. Just as I was about to ask what he was thinking, he spoke, his voice low and resonant. Real love isn't about giving up because you're not suitable. It's about fighting to adapt, working hard to become suitable together even when you're not. Someone who gives up midway. They just didn't love enough. His meaning was clear. Perhaps Ethan didn't love Zara as much as he seemed. Asher met my slightly startled gaze, his tone earnest and firm. I truly believe that the moment you decide to be with someone, whether it's because you find them suitable or because you like them, that decision comes from a place of genuine sincerity and conviction. I was stunned into silence. So, he continued softly, never invalidate the part of yourself that chose to give love. She wasn't wrong. She was chosen with conviction. I turned my face away slightly, my nose stinging with an emotion I couldn't control. You're quite good at comforting people. He propped his chin on his hand. I'm all right. I pressed my lips together, wanting to thank him. Just then he suddenly leaned closer. I jumped, quickly raising my hand to push him away. Don't move, he whispered, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. Your ex-boyfriend is watching. In my peripheral vision, I saw Ethan standing by the apartment entrance, his expression unreadable from this distance. Asher stayed a safe distance away from me, winked and chuckled. An emotionally stunted idiot who doesn't know what he had. Let him stew. After a moment I glanced over again. He's gone, I said flatly. Asher naturally leaned back. He glanced at his phone, his tone softening slightly. My ride's here too. I should get going. I gave a small nod and smiled at him. Safe travels. He paused for a second, then smiled back, his smile broadening. Hope you meet someone next time who... He stopped, then his smile turned even brighter. Actually, forget it. Hope you get rich. Not long after Asher left, Jessica arrived. The moment I saw her familiar face, my eyes instantly filled with tears. I hadn't cried since leaving Ethan's apartment, but now the tears wouldn't stop. My knee hurts, I said, looking up at her with wide, pleading eyes. Jessica sighed, coming over to help me up. I bought medicine in the car. I'll put it on for you in a bit. I took sick leave from work and stayed at Jessica's place for a week. My knee was almost fully recovered. Ethan sent me a message that week. You and Asher? I replied. We've broken up. Ethan was silent for a long time before replying. Aurora, you can't love other men. I immediately blocked him on all platforms. Then Ethan started showing up frequently near Jessica's apartment. Every time Jessica came back, her face tight with suppressed anger, I knew she had run into him. I honestly don't get it, she fumed one evening. He's the one who couldn't cut ties with his ex, and he has the nerve to ask if you've fallen for another guy? He was the one who let go first, and now he's acting like he can't live without you. She bit angrily into a piece of broccoli, then paused as something occurred to her. By the way, who is Asher? I ate my rice without batting an eye. Just a helpful stranger. It wasn't exactly a lie. After that day, Asher and I hadn't been in contact. We were meant to be two parallel lines that didn't interfere with each other, passing through a single unintentional intersection point, and then never meeting again. A silent understanding between us. Jessica nodded, acknowledging the answer, but the frustration remained etched on her face. I just really don't want to see his face anymore. My movements paused. I put down my bowl and chopsticks. I took a deep breath, looked up at her, and said slowly and clearly, "Then call the police." Jessica looked up sharply, staring at me in disbelief. "What did you say?" I looked at her calmly. "Aren't you a law major? If someone is stalking and harassing you, can't you call the police?" Jessica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Neither Ethan nor I probably expected our next meeting after the breakup to be giving statements at a police station. Ethan sat with his head bowed. The hair on his forehead was a little long, perhaps uncut for a while, falling messily and obscuring his eyes. His long, slender hands were clasped together on the table, trembling slightly. "This Mr. Song has been appearing near my residence every day recently, causing me severe harassment." Ethan looked up sharply, meeting my gaze. I paused for a moment, not flinching away, and continued my statement. "Surveillance footage and neighbors can corroborate this." The corners of Ethan's eyes turned red. After giving my statement, I stood up. Looking at Ethan, who remained silent throughout, I said coolly, "Ethan, stop harassing me." With that, I turned to Jessica, who was still processing the situation. "Let's go." As we reached the door, Jessica finally spoke, her voice low but audible to everyone in the room. "Now I believe it. You really don't love him anymore." Later, Ethan never appeared near Jessica's apartment again. He voluntarily requested a transfer back to the Shanghai branch. As for those 2 text messages, Finian explained them to me later. "I accidentally saw your phone and thought the number belonged to the guy the company was talking about. The one who kept harassing you and got arrested. I just wanted to pretend to be your boyfriend to make him back off." Then, he looked at me seriously and openly confessed, "Aurora, can I be your real boyfriend?" He looked at me with earnest, shining eyes, his feelings laid bare without any attempt at concealment. But I wasn't interested in that type. I smiled gently. "You're a good person, Finian." After I rejected him, Finian sadly took a week off work. But upon learning he had no vacation days left and would lose pay for his personal leave, he obediently returned to the office. Well, I suppose making money is always more appealing than unrequited love, isn't it?